Okay, so hello everybody, and this is Monday, 3/27/2023. After 2 weeks of vacation, it's hard to get back into it. I know, and it's very difficult, very, very difficult. I wanted today to do some review, to look at our story arc and our character arc that we've looked at before, and I wanted to progress further in Young Goodman Brown, reading that story. Let me see if I can call up story arc and character arc for us so we have that available on record. Close that doc because we don't need it. And do. Da da da. Clickety click, clickety click, clickety click, clickety click. I'm wanting you all to get to the point where you can actually write a character analysis paragraph. And so this is part of that. First thing to point out is remember that we had talked about how literature, analyzing literature, you're looking at 4 different levels of meaning. So you have the literal level and the allegorical level and the moral level and the anagogical level. So 4 different levels of meaning, and that comes originally from Dante, or probably earlier than Dante. Dante's the guy who kind of put it down in a letter, and so it's written down for the first time, really. But Thomas Aquinas also has written about it. So those 4 levels of meaning allow us to understand a work a little better. So we're looking at, we're looking at that level, we're looking at this level. And when we go to analyze something, we're thinking, what does this represent? What does this mean? What does this tell us? And the way that we understand what the author is meaning is through the themes that he brings up or she brings up. The themes are basically the author's commentary on the subject matter. He has subject matter and he makes these themes about them, and the themes are revealed through images or symbols. There are 2 types of symbols. There is the natural and there is the conventional. So when we're dealing with a natural imagery like the forest, that's a natural image. That's different from a conventional image, like say the tradition of going on a journey, or the tradition of wearing a ribbon in your hair, or even the tradition of cultural symbol of the witch's coven. What does that represent for our culture? So like in Young Goodman Brown, we're dealing with a guy who goes off on this journey and he goes into the woods and he leaves his wife behind. So what does a conventional symbol like going off on a journey or going into the woods represent? That's kind of where we're developing this thematic idea. And then we have both a plot arc and a story arc, a plot arc, and a individual character arc that shows sort of the trajectory of how the character develops over time. And when we're dealing with a story arc, we can map that story arc using what's called Freytag's pyramid. So Freytag's pyramid, as you remember, is a pyramid, looks kind of like, let's see if I can do this. It looks a bit like this here. Share screen. Oh, my photos aren't loading too fast. Oh, that's typical. You see the little blue donut of death. There we go. Freytag's pyramid. So it's got exposition, that's the normal world. That's where things are pretty static, expected, you know what's going on. It's kind of boring, kind of dull, but safe, secure, known. Then you have an inciting incident. Something occurs. And then that leads to a rising action. Things increase in tension. And the what's called conflict increases. That is the conflict within a person, or conflict between a person and another person, or conflict between a person and nature. And that leads to a rising action, builds and builds and builds until you get this climax, this apex, this top point where the tension is at its at its highest. At that moment, the character realizes something or experiences something tremendous, or there's a big battle, or things blow up. The Death Star blows up. That's the climax. And then you have falling action. That is, things begin to fall off and aren't as tense anymore. Finally, you end with resolution, which is something the character comes to, an idea the character comes to, or a state of existence the character comes to. And this map by Gustav Freytag is a pretty good map for understanding literature. And so, like, we'll see this in Nathaniel Hawthorne's story of Young Goodman Brown. But you also see it in other things. I like to think about the movie Star Wars, Episode 4 for kids, and how Star Wars has Luke Skywalker in this normal world, and then along come the droids, and they propel him, the inciting incident, propel him into rising action. It's the message of Princess Leia that he sees there with R2-D2, and it propels him into rising action. So he has all these different adventures that occur until finally he has the battle on the Death Star, which is an amazing battle scene. And the climax of it is the blowing up of the Death Star. And then finally he flies back to the fourth moon of Yavin, and there's this falling action. He reunites with his friends. And you have the resolution with the scene where he gets his medal at the end. He and Han Solo and Chewbacca, they'll get their medals at the end, and that's the resolution. And they turn around, everybody claps. All the British extras clap. And the music at the end of the movie. So the perfect example of Freytag's pyramid and what that looks like. And we can see that with a lot of different stories. So we have different stories that show that that change in the story plot, the rising tension and all. So then you have a character arc, and the character arc is similar to a story arc. It's like this is the development of the character over time, and over the course of the plot, over time, the character develops, changes, alters, and becomes a slightly different person. So we can also map that using what's called a 3-act structure. And it looks like this. And you see here that Act 1 is the introduction, and you have a plot point, it says. The plot point is normally somewhat akin with the inciting incident. So it's known about the same thing. Then you have a rising action, the stakes get higher. And then you have a plot point 2, and that's normally going to be the right before the climax. The character themselves has a crisis at the moment of the climax, and then he has a falling action, a falling off action. And like in Star Wars, right before the Death Star blows up, there's Luke, use the Force, and he's debating whether he should or not, and then he does, and wow, it works. Wow, we blew up the Death Star. Good job. So similar thing can be seen in Young Goodman Brown. The character has a crisis moment, and then there's a climax right after that. Normally with character development, you've got something wrong with the character. That is a character flaw, what's called a hamartano. Hamartano, not harmatano. Hamartano. It's a fatal flaw in the character. And the rising action is what happens. What is it there to fix the character? That's the agony. That's why it's called a protagonist. He's the first sufferer. So all the things are there in order to fix that character, or fix his flaw, or fix his problem, his difficulty. And then the problem is fixed at the end, and wisdom is granted at the end. I'll have to take a look at this and see what needs fixing on this 3-act structure that I downloaded, because there are points in here that are squooey. But that's the development of a character. So that's a bit of review, And one more thing that I wanted to throw in today was the idea of the hero's journey. And this is an analysis that was given by Joseph Campbell, who is he's a decent enough literary analyst worth looking at. And he has this idea that most major stories follow the same plot. And his plot is, as he calls it, the hero's journey. It's basically, I'll open it up here and you can see it. It's basically the idea is that most stories follow the plot of a hero or who is not yet a hero. He becomes a hero over time, but he's not yet there. And I'm going to open two things here so we can see them both. He's not quite yet there, according to Joseph Campbell. And so during the course of his travels, his journey, he becomes this heroic character. And here is what this looks like in a map. So you can see that too. Da-da. Yeah, okay. Right, so here's the hero's journey, done on a spiral version. Normally you see it mapped to a circle version. The hero, the young neophyte, young inexperienced guy, the young good man, is in the ordinary world, is in the normal world, the static world where things are known and expected, you know what to look for. And he basically has a call to adventure. So he moves out of that stasis or that static state to a call to adventure. And Campbell says he sometimes refuses that call. No, I will not go on that. And sometimes he accepts that call to adventure. And then he has a meeting with his mentor, the guy who's going to guide him along the way. And he crosses the threshold into what's called the special world at some point. He makes a decision to go off and do something and goes into the unknown special world. There in that special world, or that unknown, extraordinary world, you can say, he has tests and allies, enemies, and then he has what Campbell calls the approach to the inmost cave. I kind of like that. It's kind of a neat idea, the approach to the inmost cave. He goes into this dark interior place where he's experienced something he never thought he would experience. And then he goes into this ordeal in the abyss, in the darkest places where he goes. So it's like Bilbo going down and meeting Gollum for the first time. There he faces his shadow self, his doppelganger, what he could become if he doesn't take steps to prevent it. And that facing of himself allows him to rise above himself, to become a better person immediately, because he's rejecting that Gollum-like character. He's rejecting that other thing that is so alien to him. And that's called an apotheosis. It means a rising up to divinity. Apotheosis. Campbell says he gets an ultimate boon at that point. He gets a sword or a ring or a gauntlet of power or some knowledge of some sort, or this boon, this gift allows him then to go back into the ordinary world again and do extraordinary things. But he at first doesn't want to go back, so he has a refusal to return, and then he comes back to the road back home, and he comes back as a master of both worlds, the ordinary and the extraordinary, or special world. And therefore he's returning to the village with a special knowledge. You can see this in the story like Bilbo. Bilbo goes down and in the Misty Mountains, he confronts first a Gollum, and then later on he confronts Smaug. But he confronts Gollum and gets the ring, and that allows him to do all these amazing things. Because Bilbo could become like Gollum. Now, in that story, he could also become like the fighter, and he could become like the dragon. So there's that too. But he certainly does confront Gollum and defies Gollum and escapes from Gollum. So he comes back. Bilbo comes back to his world after the death of Smaug and the Battle of Five Armies. He comes back to his own world as a different guy, a hobbit who knows more than the Shire. He's not bound to the Shire. We see that also in Star Wars, Episode 4, where Luke goes off of Tatooine. He decides to leave Tatooine after he discovers that his parents, his aunt and uncle, his foster parents, have been killed violently by the Empire, and he decides he wants to fight the Empire too. So he crosses that threshold with Ben Kenobi, his mentor. They go out into space to return the droids to Princess Leia. And there they're tested, and they get onto the Death Star, which is, it's death. It's like they go into the abyss there. And they face all sorts of trials, a trash compactor, and the fighting with the stormtroopers, and then he faces his shadow self, which is Darth Vader, near the end of the movie. But he doesn't face him. Obi-Wan Kenobi, Ben Kenobi faces him. So his mentor faces Darth Vader for him. It's kind of neat because in that scene, the Abyss is actually in that scene. If you go back and watch Star Wars Episode 4, when Darth Vader is fighting Ben Kenobi, they're on the other side of the doorway where they're fighting. There's a very deep pit. And when Luke is shooting after Ben Kenobi gets killed, and Luke is shooting at the stormtroopers, and he kills a couple, and they fall into that abyss. You know. So it really is an ordeal in the abyss of the Death Star. But Luke decides not to be Darth Vader because Ben Kenobi tells him to run instead of fighting, and he basically gets this boon of knowledge of the Force, and he goes and he fights against Darth Vader in the Battle of the Death Star, and that's where he ultimately gains this boon, this boon of knowing that he's one with the Force. And he goes back home to his friends, special knowledge and all that. So, anyway, we'll see this in Young Goodman Brown too. It's a pretty good map to have for various stories that we read. This also can be seen. We'll just look at one more map of this. Let's see. We'll go back and look at that one more time. This also appears in other map forms. You can see it. This is a hero's journey with Bilbo Baggins. Kind of neat application there, where Bilbo confronts Gollum and then confronts Smaug. It's kind of neat. And then, not that one, but let's go here. What do I want to look at here? Let's look at, not this. Okay, so this one. Yeah, that one, right there. Okay, this is just a more complex version of the same thing. It's just so you can see that it can be mapped in different ways. The idea is sound, even if the mapping is different from one thing to the next. So here's a more, I guess, detailed map of the hero's journey done on a circular form instead of a spiral form. Kind of neat to see that. Anyway, it's a good thing to have when we are looking at a story and we're basically analyzing the story. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to read further with Young Goodman Brown with you guys. Not being here necessarily, it's kind of tough to do that. But let's do this when we meet on Wednesday, because we'll meet on Wednesday morning, 9 a.m. Via video for Riker and via in person for Caleb and Andrew. We'll meet at 9 a.m. on Wednesday. That's Wednesday on the 29th, I want to say. Yeah, 29th of March we'll meet. And we'll have all this at our fingertips. Hopefully you will watch this video by then. And we'll read Young Goodman Brown. We'll just sit down and read it together and take a look. I want to encourage all three of you guys to take a look at the video of Young Goodman Brown that I'm going to post. It's basically a dramatic version of it. Or retelling of it, and I want you to look at it so you get a sense of what the plot is. That way, when we're reading, you don't get completely bogged down in the words. You know something of what the plot is about. So I'm going to encourage you to do that. And for the other two classes, we'll just wing it on Wednesday, I guess, when we do meet. And Riker, you and I will meet on Wednesday, 1 o'clock, via video. So we'll meet there and take a look at the good book, the Bible. Until then, folks, enjoy your day. It looks like a beautiful day, and spring is on the way, which is a nice thing. You know, it's good to get out of the icebox and to scamper about on the earth. So God bless you all. Westu Hal, as they say, Westu Hal. And we'll see you later in the week. Bye-bye.